11th, 2024. I know, with intent opening.
How high, ma'am?
Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Gonzalez.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Lewis.
Present.
Councillor Wong.
Present.
Councillor Nolan.
Present.
I believe that Councillor Rosenthal will be joining us shortly. And finally, President Peterson.
Here, thank you. All right, can we play the safety video for the in-person attendees?
I'm Jason, and I'm an event production manager. Here at the Portland 5 Centers for the Arts, safety is our #1 priority, not only for our guests, but for our staff members. I'm at the Portland 5 Centers for the Arts, and you're at the Metro Regional Center. The council chambers are located on the 3rd floor. In the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room. Go down the stairway to the 2nd floor, exit through the main entrance by the reception desk, and gather in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the reception desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you, and come visit us at Portland 5.
Great, thank you. Before we move into our agenda, counselors, please welcome the students from Elevate Oregon, a youth program that promotes education, self-reliance, and achievement in the Park Rose School District. You guys want to stand?
Hey, y'all. How's it going?
Thank you so much for being in attendance. Elevate Oregon students help administer City of Rose's Community Enhancement Grants, part of the Metro's Community Enhancement Grant Program and Waste Prevention and Environmental Services. And today they are here to learn more about civic engagement and career opportunities in the garbage and recycling system, as well as running for offices, which I was encouraging earlier. Yep. Today, these students are here to learn more about all of that, and I just want to say thank you for being so engaged in your community and for being curious. So thank you. Thanks for being here today. I will now open our public communication on non-agenda items. Connor, will you please describe to the audience our process for the public communication portion of the meeting on non-agenda items?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. So if anyone wishes to testify on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll manage a timer to go off of the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can sign up by hitting the raise hand button, which, depending on your version of Zoom, is either at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. For those joining us in person, we have some blue cards in the back of the room, which you can fill out and bring up to me. For everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, President Peterson, counselors, we haven't had folks sign up in advance, but I do see that one hand has gone up in our Zoom audience. So I will go ahead and promote them up. So Dana, I'm going to promote you up to a panelist. Once you accept that, you should be able to turn on your camera. Right, there we go. Hi, Dana. You should be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself now. So you'll have 3 minutes, and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Dana West. I am a member of the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, and I have worked as a stagehand in Portland for almost 20 years. In that time, in the 80 years since its last renovation, and in the over 100 years of its existence, the Civic Auditorium, now known as the Keller Auditorium, has been the epitome and the benchmark of performing arts in Portland. From exuberant Broadway shows to enchanting ballets to heartbreaking operas, the Keller provides unparalleled performing arts experiences to tens of thousands, enriching their lives, our culture, and our city. These productions do not happen by magic, and the Keller also creates hundreds of steady, good-paying jobs with good benefits. Much of the most rewarding work of my career has taken place at the Keller, including Oregon Ballet Theater's production of Dracula, Portland Opera's production of Sweeney Todd, and the touring productions of Hamilton, Wicked, and Les Miserables. While the necessity of seismic retrofits is self-evident, a complete shutdown of our flagship performing arts venue without an adequate replacement would have a catastrophic effect on these workers and on our local performing arts groups. The live events industry was the first to shut down and the last to reopen during the COVID-19 lockdown, and many of these groups and individuals are still recovering from this unprecedented event. To deny them their livelihood again, particularly without the expanded emergency benefits available during the pandemic, is unconscionable. It would be a devastating blow to the artistic and economic integrity of our city. Therefore, it is clear that the only practical option for the well-being of our city and its residents is the construction of a new theater facility with the renovation of the Keller to follow after its opening. I have heard concerns that the Keller does not sufficiently support the economic and artistic robustness of our downtown. But if this is the case, I must ask why the Lion King has altered its touring schedule to make good the performances canceled due to the winter storm earlier this year. Similarly, I've heard it said that the Keller is not considered technically sufficient for modern touring shows. But if this is the case, I must ask why the Lion King chose the Keller as the venue in which to upgrade its lighting systems and overhaul their use during performances, up to and including flying the original artistic team to Portland to perform said work on site. If we truly wish to restore and revitalize downtown Portland, I can think of few less advisable ideas than eliminating jobs and decimating cultural institutions. Instead, we should move forward in expanding the cultural and artistic abundance of our city, and the existence of 2 large modern theater spaces would be a tremendous asset towards this goal. In fact, we can already see this principle in action as we routinely reap the benefits of the existence of our 2 arenas, which routinely host concurrent events, dramatically increasing the opportunities for and enrichment of our third city. Thank you for your time. I cede my remaining time.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, next up we have Kate Murrah. So Kate, I'm going to go ahead and promote you up. All right, Kate, you should be able to unmute yourself and turn on your camera. You'll have 3 minutes, and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Thank you all so much for listening to my testimony. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. I first want to say that I agree with everything my sister Dana West just put forward to the council. My name is Kate Murrah. I am a stagehand as well with IATSE Local 28. And I am also since 2006. And I'm also a theater professional in and around town with many of the smaller theaters in our vibrant theater ecosystem. And rather than reiterate what Dana has already so eloquently said, I will instead focus on the people who have not been in the room. And I am appalled that throughout the conversation of what to do with the Keller, the stagehands and the user groups, the people that know the theater most intimately, have not been included at the table in any meaningful way. We have had to fight to be heard. We have had to fight to find out when these meetings are. And that should not be the case, as it is our livelihoods at stake. What I have heard talked about a lot are architecture and revitalizing downtown. Architecture is a very secondary need to the actual running of the facility. And please, I am getting on the bus right now, so I apologize, but I am in transit to work at another one of our flagship companies. So as moving forward, please make sure that the stagehands and the user groups are meaningfully involved in how the buildings are either rebuilt in a separate building, because to have 2 years off would be catastrophic for so many user groups and so many people whose jobs and livelihoods and healthcare and ability to go to work count on the Broadway shows and the opera and the ballet, and make sure that those of us that actually have the expertise of the lighting, the sound, the rigging, the loading docks, the wardrobe, the wigs, that we are meaningfully involved in the design. Because when we are not included, things like what happened at the Keller when they bought a whole bunch of new washing machines that are horrible. for
You're at
our-
your 3 minutes. If you could wrap it up in the next couple seconds.
I didn't hear that.
You're at 3 minutes. If you could just wrap it up in like 10 seconds.
Yes, absolutely. Because when we are not involved, things that like the washing machines that were bought, which are not good for our actual uses, happen. So please include us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, that is everybody that had their hand up in the audience. I'll just give another moment for anybody who would like to sign up to testify, once again, by hitting that raise hand button or by bringing up one of the blue cards in the back of the room to me. All right, and seeing none, President Peterson.
Sure. And before I close this out, I just want to say thank you to Kate and Dana for coming before us and raising this issue. It's an issue, I believe, that counselors have been asking our partner city of Portland as they go through this conversation to know that there are people who know how these things work and their voices need to be included, and that we truly understand the import of continuation of keeping things going in this space, because the arts and culture are going to bring us out of the space that we find ourselves economically in downtown Portland. So thank you for being here today. And with that, I will close the public communication portion of the meeting on non-agenda items. And we will move on to the consent agenda. There are 2 items on today's consent agenda. Resolution number 24-5395 for the purpose of adding a new ODOT carbon funded signal system project grouping to the 2024 through 27 MTIP to meet federal transportation project delivery requirements. And resolution number 24-5401 for the purpose of confirming the reappointment of 1 member and an appointment of 1 new member to the Metro Audit Committee. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Been moved by Councilor Gonzalez and seconded by Councilor Simpson. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right. The motion passes. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the second reading and vote of ordinance number 24-1509 for the purpose of amending Metro Code Chapter 7.04 to expand eligible recipients of 2040 planning and development grants and allow allocation of CET funds to community placemaking grant programs. Councilors, you'll recall this ordinance proposes changes to Metro's code to create more opportunities for our partners in tribal government and unincorporated communities to access 2040 planning and development grants. The first reading and public hearing was March 21st, and we received no public testimony. Staff are here to provide any questions that you may have had in the meantime. If there are any questions, we can call up staff. Nope. Seeing none and no hands raised on the screen. Do I have a motion for ordinance number 24-1509 for the purpose of amending Metro Code Chapter 7.04 to expand eligible recipients of 2040 planning and development grants and allow allocation of CET funds to community placemaking grant program?
Move 24-1509.
Seconded.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councilor Lewis and seconded by Councilor Gonzalez. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Councilor Wong.
Aye.
Councilor Simpson.
Aye.
Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Councilor Lewis.
Aye.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye, the motion passes. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to public hearing for ordinance number 1508 for the purpose of amending Metro Code Section 5.05.055 to allow the disposal of cleanup material at a limited capacity landfill under certain conditions.
I apologize, President Peterson. This is the second reading and vote as well. We had the public hearing.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Do I need to reread a new title? Okay, thank you. This proposed amendment to Metro's landfill, so this is the second reading and vote, to amend Metro's landfill policy that would allow cleanup material from the region to be disposed of as-fill at certain landfills to facilitate closure in a timely manner. The first reading and public hearing was March 21st, and council received public testimony in favor of the resolution at that time. We do have staff here to answer any questions that have come up in the meantime. Councilors, are there any questions? Seeing none and seeing none on the screen. Do I have a motion for ordinance number 24-1508 for the purpose of amending Metro Code Section 5.05.055 to allow the disposal of cleanup material at a limited capacity landfill under certain conditions?
I'll move 24-1508.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Lewis and seconded by Councilor Simpson. Any further discussion? No. All right.
Fast business day.
Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Councilor Wong.
Aye.
Councilor Simpson.
Aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye. And I'll just say, it's at moments like this where we remember other colleagues who bore the brunt of policy decisions before us. And Councilor Bob Stacy certainly moved to have less impact in agricultural lands through our landfills. And this is one of the results, and this actually accelerates the closure of that landfill. So just a shout out to our former colleague. Thank you. All right. We're moving on to a presentation. Oh, we're back into budget. Here we go. This is the beginning of our conversations about the proposed budget. We have our first presentation today for the fiscal 2024 through 25 proposed budget. Our Chief Operating Officer, Marisa Madrigal, in her capacity as Metro's Budget Officer, is here to present the proposed budget along with Brian Kennedy, our Chief Financial Officer, and we also have our auditor here today for this first set of conversations. Council, we will now gavel in as the budget committee, and I will ask Connor to read resolution number 24-5397 into the record by title only.
Sorry about that. Thank you, President Peterson. So the title is Resolution Number 24-5397 for the purpose of approving the FY 2024-25 budget, setting property tax levies, and transmitting the approved budget to the Multnomah County Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission.
Great. Any questions on that? Seeing no further discussion, I'm assuming that there's a presentation?
Yes.
Okay, that's not here, sorry. We were just gonna skip right over the whole thing and move on. Who am I turning it over to? Marisa? Okay.
Good morning, councilors. I'm Marisa Madrigal, Chief Operating Officer. I'm going to first hand it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Brian Kennedy.
Thank you, Marisa. I can bring the slides up. Got a couple slides to start us off. Thank you, Council President Peterson and members of the Metro Council. This begins the public-facing portion of the fiscal year 24-25 budget process. We're really happy to have the opportunity to present the proposed budget to you today. Next slide, please. So today we are starting with a brief overview of the budget process. Marisa will deliver the budget message. I will share some information about the budget environment, significant changes to the budget. We will hear from Metro Auditor Brian Evans, and then finally wrap up with an overview of the next steps. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the budget adoption key milestones, this process is very similar each year. The budget process actually begins back in November, kind of a lot of technical exercise that staff delivers, culminating in presenting the proposed budget at this time of year. After the council approves the budget, it moves to the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, as well as additional council deliberation that happens during that time. And we'll talk more about the upcoming dates that you will deliberate on the budget and have opportunities to hear from the public as well, with the goal of getting to budget adoption on June 13th. At this point, I'm going to hand it back over to Marisa for the budget message.
Thank you, Brian. Council, after rapidly restoring many of the pandemic era cuts in previous years, with this proposal, leadership is taking time to reflect and assess. This proposed budget supports slowing growth in some areas while strategically investing in others. The proposed fiscal year 24-25 budget funds general fund reserves, sets aside funding for strategic capital projects, and invests in three council target areas: housing, the economy, and the environment. The proposal includes few increases and focuses on successfully implementing the Parks and Nature Bond, the Supportive Housing Services Measure, and the Affordable Housing Bond. It proposes a waste prevention and environmental services budget that funds current service levels at Metro transfer stations and critical services such as Metro's household hazardous waste collection events and centers. Although we're focused on continuing our existing work and prioritizing council focus areas, we're also bracing for a turbulent economic period for our venues. The Portland region continues to experience headwinds related to national reputational damage and ongoing safety concerns that have negatively impacted our convention booking pipeline. I swear what I'm saying is interesting. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Tough crowd.
No, one person just achieved her nap.
So the impacts of those headwinds are significant enough that OCC will strategically operate at a deficit in fiscal year 25 as the team works with partners to improve perceptions of safety and bring more travel back to Portland. Although business levels are very good for all the MARC venues, inflation and labor costs have increased operating costs, and all venues are anticipating an increased outlay of safety and security funding to combat the reputational impacts mentioned above. And as the Affordable Housing Bond continues to deliver successes but begins the process of winding down, Metro must decide whether or not it should continue to play a role in regional affordable housing at the same scale. How we choose to move forward in cooperation with local and state stakeholders will shape the region's housing environment for generations to come. A stakeholder advisory table convened March 1st to advise on the future of affordable housing funding at Metro, and this table will help shape a post-budget recommendation to Council for future action. Next slide, please. In addition to allocating general fund support for planning, development, and research, and continuing our funding of Metro's civic engagement and capacity building grants, we've prioritized internal investments in performance measurement and data analytics. The new investments are intended to make sure that we're tracking our progress towards strategic targets and that we're using data and technical information in support of our policy goals, and that we have the capability to respond quickly and credibly to questions from other governments, the media, and the public. Next slide, please. As you recall, we received strong council direction to focus our efforts toward these three key areas: housing, economy, and environment. Next slide. Taking this council direction in June of 2023, Metro began working toward a new strategic plan establishing strategic targets in the three key areas of economy, environment, and housing. Council adopted these targets in December of 2023, and we will be working toward identifying specific community indicators to track progress over the next year in alignment with regional planning work. In the short term, to ensure that council direction to prioritize these vital focus areas is being fully integrated into department work plans, we want to ensure that the FY 24-25 budget contains department performance measures that capture the work that is already happening within Metro to make progress in each of these areas, as well as capturing the programs and services that are required for Metro operations. Next slide. In the budget presentations and adopted budget document, departments will be sharing 2 to 3 budget performance measures that capture operational and service metrics, progress towards strategic goals, and other measures that are meaningful for that department. These metrics are complementary to our equity performance measures, which continue to help highlight issues like reducing disparity in access and outcomes, or increasing services to historically underserved populations. To sum up, Metro is at work across the region, fighting for a brighter future for our community. From the event space to the watershed, our work makes a positive difference in the lives of the people, plants, and animals who call this place home. This budget aims to ensure the incredible public servants who do the work every day, who make our programs a reality, have the tools, support, and respect that they need to do their best. I'll now pass the mic back to our CFO, Brian Kennedy, to walk us through the numbers. Before I do that, I'm hearing echo. Is anybody else?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marisa. Next slide, please. So starting off with the budget environment, I'm sure all of you realize this is the exact same slide I used last year. It's okay if you don't. The point here is that a lot of things haven't really changed. So the headwinds we had last year are the same headwinds we have now. Housing affordability, homelessness, inflation and interest rates. You may have heard the latest inflation numbers came out yesterday, and after being on a pretty good track for most of the last year, inflation bumped back up to around 3.5% over March of last year, which is going in the wrong direction. You might recall when we moved into 2024, there was an expectation that the Federal Reserve might start cutting rates as early as this winter. I think they obviously did not cut rates at their last meeting, and I think the odds of a rate cut happening in the next few months are pretty unlikely at this point. Inflation appears to be sticky and is affecting us. It's affecting the entire economy. So to the extent we're seeing increased costs, it's not necessarily something unique to Metro. It's happening all across the economy and continues to be a challenge. Interest rates are also kind of an interesting issue. They are both a challenge to the extent we're going into the bond market potentially. Higher interest costs are a challenge, but also on funds that we have invested, we're earning higher returns, which generates more resources for investing in the programs and services that we've prioritized. Finally, in terms of the venues, Portland's reputational damage continues to be an issue, and that's one of the main drivers affecting the Oregon Convention Center and their booking. And one of the things to remember is it's not just a fiscal year 24-25 challenge. The pipeline is not as full as we would like it to be. So this is something we're going to continue to deal with for the next couple of years. We have a lot of confidence, in our convention center staff that they will be able to manage through this, but it's a challenge. And it's a challenge that's going to take attention away from some other things that they probably would like to be working on. In terms of tailwinds, we still have strong support for voter-approved programs, and we're in the middle of implementing a number of those programs, and that is kind of providing a lift to Metro and a lift to the region because we're making critical investments in the things that matter most to the voters. And then finally, Metro's financial condition overall continues to be stable. I'm going to have a little more detail on this on the next slide. So we've talked a lot about Metro's financial condition and financial stability. One of the best metrics we have for this is our financial reserves. I have a chart here. This is new for the proposed budget presentation. It's highly scientific. This is my personal objective assessment of the reserve status of our different operating funds. When you look at our operating and capital funds, when you look at the funds from the operating perspective, you'll notice a lot of green. We've made a lot of progress over the last 4 years since the pandemic, building back up those operating reserves and putting our major funds in the position where they can be more financially resilient and able to deliver on those programs and services. We have some areas that we're worried about. A couple of those are not surprises. The Expo Center, a big reason we're doing the Expo Futures project is because we know of our challenges there. Portland 5 Centers for the Arts, like in the public testimony we heard, we have some challenges there around facilities. We had a cooling tower replacement project and now a roof project that are dramatically more expensive than we expected that is impacting our operating reserves. And then Parks and Nature, we have a challenge here where we have been drawing down our operating reserves and we need to do some tightening up. On the capital side, you'll notice we don't have any green dots. which this is pretty common for governments. It's hard to invest in capital. Auditor Evans is actually be bringing an audit later this year, highlighting a number of those issues. We have a couple of red dots, which again are not surprises. At Expo and Portland 5, we know we have big challenges, but this does show that through the pandemic, we've made significant progress in, particularly on the operating side, making our facilities and funds more financially resilient. Next slide, please. So in addition to the changes that Marisa highlighted, a couple I wanted to point out is we continue to have general fund investment in our housing work. It's not just the Affordable Housing Bond and supportive housing services. We have a general fund investment in our regional housing strategy and for covering administrative costs related to the Affordable Housing Bond. And then another topic that is kind of near and dear to my heart, we're starting a significant investment in our technology systems, particularly focused on financial and human resources systems. This is a really important project that, when looking at a financial system that was originally implemented in 1996. So starting that project next fiscal year with a major investment is a really important step in becoming more efficient internally. Next slide, please. The budget by fund slide, you've seen this before. I think a couple of things to take away from this slide are the total proposed budget is over $2 billion, which is kind of a dramatic milestone for Metro. But as you look through the individual funds, you'll notice there isn't a lot of change in most places. The biggest change we're seeing is around supportive housing services, and part of this is around our accounting rule, where we book all the revenues we receive from tax collections and only kind of book them as expended when the counties actually spend them. So the appropriation for supportive housing services in the current year is a little over $400 million. Next year is over $800 million, and that's really a reflection of those cash balances that we're projecting the counties will roll over to next year. And that's the driver taking our budget from $1.7 billion last year to over $2 billion next fiscal year. Relatively modest growth in FTE, just a 2% increase, kind of reflecting Marisa's message that in most cases we're keeping things, relatively stable. Next slide, please. This is also a new slide. I wanted to highlight the difference from 10 years ago, the 2014-15 amended budget, to the proposed budget. You'll notice the amended budget in 14-15 was under $500 million, and next year's proposed budget is over $2 billion. It's 4 times larger. And this isn't to say necessarily that bigger is better, but really an illustration just of how much has changed. You'll notice on the right side of the chart, in the pie chart, housing represents over 50% of Metro's budget. It did not exist in 2014-15. It's a really dramatic change. You also notice most of the other changes, like the Oregon Zoo was bigger in 14-15. That's because we were in the midst of implementing the 2008 Zoo Bond. It's smaller now as that bond is spent down. Parks and Nature is bigger. They were on the tail end of wrapping up the 2006 Natural Areas Bond in 14-15. And really the message to take away from this is how important voter-approved programs are to Metro's budget. And I think more importantly, how much it matters for Metro to honor the commitments we've made to the voters as we implement those programs. Keeping and maintaining that voter trust is absolutely essential and matters more to us than most other local governments in the region. So I think it's just a really helpful perspective to keep that in mind, because it drives significantly our ability to deliver those programs and services to the region. Next slide, please. This shows year by year over the last 10 years. The main takeaway here is you see that growth over time. It's a reflection of those voter-approved programs. The blue and red bars are kind of our actual spending. The green bar is our contingency. So the green bars only show up in the final 2 years because those are budgeted amounts. The prior years are actuals. And the black line shows our fund balance. You'll notice that fund balance line goes up, stays pretty high, then we project it going down. That's the spend down of bond funds. So we issued all of the affordable housing bonds in advance. We have sold Parks and Nature bonds. So that black line going down is actually a good thing because that really is projects showing up on the ground in our communities. So again, I think really just highlighting kind of the change over the last 10 years. Next slide, please. This is also a useful metric, our agency full-time equivalent history. So there has been growth over the last 10 years. You do see that significant drop in 2021 due to the pandemic. The 24-25 proposed is a very modest increase over the current year's budget. It really is a reflection of increases in activity across our operations. Next slide, please. Debt service obligations are an important thing to show because Metro carries a significant amount of general obligation debt and some other smaller debts, but the trend is going in the right direction there. Our principal is going down over time as we repay that. And again, that repayment reflects projects that are being built in communities. So we like to see that direction, and this also is a reflection of support from voters for the work that we do. Next slide, please. The property tax levy is important to show. As you might recall, when you get to adopting the budget and various points in the budget, one of the most important things you are doing is setting the property tax levy for the next fiscal year. There are three elements to that. Metro's permanent rate, 9.66 cents per thousand. Metro's local option levy rate for parks and nature at 9.6 cents per thousand. And then the debt service levy. We estimate the debt service levy here. So last year it was approximately 38 cents. Next year we're projecting approximately 39 cents, below the target pledge we have made to voters of 40 cents per thousand. For a homeowner with a home of an assessed value of $275,000, which is kind of roughly the average across the three counties, that's an impact next fiscal year of about $160 per year for the total Metro's total property tax levy, permanent rate, local option levy, debt service rate. Next slide, please. Now I'm happy to hand it over to Auditor Brian Evans.
Great, thank you, Brian. Slide.
There's supposed to be something on this slide. Apologies, there might be something wrong with the file. Oh. Let me try and bring it up again.
Well, I'll start for a second so we don't have to delay. Thank you, Council President Peterson, my councilors. I appreciate the opportunity to present the Office of the Auditor's proposed budget for fiscal year 24-25. As a reminder, Metro Code outlines a separate process for the Auditor's Office budget. That's to ensure there's independence in the budget-making decisions. So my budget is presented directly to you rather than with the rest of the agency, but it is in the budget document itself, which I appreciate.
I'm sorry, yeah, the versions that we have, the slides 18 and 19 look, but it looks like going forward they are.
Okay, well, I'll wing it. I don't have the visuals, but I'll give you the high level. So first slide was just a reminder of our mission. So it's to ensure Metro is accountable to the public, to ensure activities are transparent, and to improve the efficiency, effectiveness, and quality of Metro's programs and services. Had a couple slides on accomplishments to date, year to date from this year. So completed 3 audits, managed 20 reports to the accountability hotline, and administered the contract for the annual financial audit. The 3 audits that you may or may not remember are the transfer station operating controls audit, which was published in September 2023, the affordable housing bond audit, which was in November 2023, and the supportive housing services audit that was published in January 2024. If you could see the visual, you would see that 93% of my budget is for personal services and 7% is for materials and services. This is pretty consistent with previous years. That 7% of materials and service budget is really for the contract for the accountability hotline, for a fellowship program with Portland State, and then a small kind of set aside amount that we reserve just in case we need to hire a subject matter expert on an audit we're working on. Typically we don't have to do that, but it's very nice to have a small chunk of change in there just to be able to move quickly if needed. I will not repeat the actual numbers in our budget because that'll be hard to hear. But generally, we're just right above. We're at about $1.2 million in the proposed budget for this year. That is a little bit more than last year's, and a little bit more than the previous years. If you could see the numbers. And finally, just give you a heads up on what to look forward to in terms of audits underway right now. We have 4 audits. One is looking at financial policies for renewal and replacement. That's the audit that CFO Kennedy mentioned. Anticipate that audit will probably be out next month or in June. We're also working on an audit of span of control, which is to look at the number of layers of management in an organization and the number of direct reports per manager. I anticipate that'll be out in June. Financial condition of audit, Metro, looking back about 10 years. I think that will be out in June as well. And then one of the audits that we have underway, performance measures, will likely be published in the next fiscal year. I will be happy to answer any questions you have, and I will send you the slide deck after this in case you want to review and match up my talking points with the visuals.
Thank you, Auditor. I just want to say thank you. It's fun to all be back in person, but we have had window cleaning going on, and you rose to the challenge along with the technical issues. So thank you. It's a lot going on today, but thank you.
I think we had just a couple more slides. Excellent. We are in the public phase of the budget process, as we mentioned. A couple things up here. We have the public hearings that are scheduled that start next week and run through June 6th, including the May 30th Tax Supervising and Conservation Committee hearing, which is a public hearing, but it is convened by the TSCC. Next slide, please. In terms of budget amendments for councilors, those budget amendments, budget notes, if you have any, are due May 24th. We will have an opportunity on June 4th to deliberate them, and then council consideration of the amendments and budget notes is on June 6th. And I believe that is the final slide. Oh, no, one more. Budget adoption, key milestones. So budget approval is May 2nd. The key element of the budget approval is you are specifying the rate of each ad valorem tax levy, so the permanent rate, local option levy rate, and the debt service levy. And as well, when you approve the budget, that officially transmits it to the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission. Then, as I mentioned before, we have that hearing on the 30th. This is a required step under Oregon local budget law. And the final step in the budget process is adoption by the council, scheduled for June 13th. You will be setting appropriations and then imposing and categorizing the taxes. And with that, I believe we're done. We're happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions for staff at this point, counselors? Seeing no hands. Oh, Counselor Wong.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to the staff for the presentation. And I know this has been a lot of work. I'm not sure if this is the best time to ask it, but I did see in the slides that there was a 16% increase in the budget from last fiscal year. And then just a 2% increase in staffing. So that's a $300 million increase in the budget overall, but you're just adding like 15 positions. And I know, the CEO had said we're at a maintained kind of budget, but that doesn't feel like a maintained budget necessarily. And I'm wondering if, the staffing levels accurately represent kind of the growing kind of budget and needs to administer that.
Councillor Wonga is an excellent question. I think the kind of the easiest explanation is the reason for that significant increase is primarily as a result of Metro's accounting policies. I believe we talked about this last year as well, where our accounting policy for supportive housing services with revenues is that Metro has a significant amount of control over the expenditure of those revenues. So when we transfer that money to the county, which when we receive a tax disbursement from the city of Portland, our collection agency, we turn that money over to the counties in less than a week. It's typically about 3 days. But the movement of that money from our bank account to the county's bank account doesn't mean that it's actually spent under our accounting policies. It's only spent when the counties actually expend it, when they are investing it in services on the ground. So we get reporting from the counties on a quarterly basis where we track how much they've actually spent as a percentage of how much we have transferred to them. So what you're seeing in the budget this year is a reflection that the counties have large cash balances that we're projecting will roll over to next fiscal year. Right, based on the second quarter, our projection is that's around $430 million. So that is making our budget appear larger, even though that money is not sitting in Metro's bank account. So that money is sitting in the bank accounts of Washington County, Clackamas County, Multnomah County, but we reflect it on our books until they've actually invested it in those supportive housing services programs. So I think that's the reason there's a disconnect between the staffing level and the size of the budget, because we are not directly delivering those services. That's on the counties to do.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions? Okay. Well, I see next on the agenda we have a break.
So long. I think we have a public hearing for the proposed budget before the break.
Okay.
And I can describe the procedures for the public hearing.
Okay. Yes, we do have a public hearing. And yeah, Connor, could you describe the procedure?
This is Metro Attorney Carrie McLaren. Sorry to interject. I just want to make clear that we are opening a public hearing on resolution number 24-5397. And after Deputy Council President Huang, after you officially open that, then let's have Connor read the procedures for that public hearing.
Thank you, Carrie. I am caught up now.
So, Councilor Huang, if you would just declare the public hearing open,
Okay.
then we can have Connor.
I want to open the public hearing on resolution number 24-5397. And Connor, would you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public hearing?
Yes, thank you. So if anyone wishes to testify on resolution number 24-5397, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll manage a timer to go off of the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can sign up by hitting the raise hand button, which, depending on your version of Zoom, is either at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. If you're joining us in person, you can sign up by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bringing that up to me. For those joining us on Zoom, I'll be promoting you up to a full panelist, so I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept that promotion. Once you do, you'll be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. And as a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, counselors, we have not had anybody sign up in advance to testify on this item. And I'll just give folks in both our Zoom and physical audience a chance to raise their hand if they would like to testify now. All right, and seeing none, Deputy Council President Huang.
Okay. Well, seeing no further discussion, I will now close this public hearing, and the Metro Council will hold additional public hearings on the budget prior to adoption. The next public hearing will be on Thursday, April 25th. Metro Council will consider approving the fiscal year 24-25 budget on May 2nd, and the approved budget will be sent to the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission for review. The TSCC hearing on Metro's budget is scheduled for May 30th at 12 p.m. No further action on the budget will be taken at this meeting. The Budget Committee will resume on April 25th. Councilors, we will now take a 15-minute recess before returning to council business for our last agenda items of the day.
Thank you. Councilor Wong, I also just wanted to offer, since it's about 11:19, if you wanted, we could skip the break and continue moving and have the break later in the meeting, or we could take it as scheduled. It's up to you.
Councilors, what do you think?
Show discretion, sir.
We do have 2 budget presentations out.
Yes, let's take the break, and then President Peterson should be back to preside over the rest of the meeting.
Thank you. Sounds good.
I didn't see a break. for Metro.
Okay. It is 11:35, and we are going to get started again, folks.
All right. We have a quorum and we're reconvening the Metro Council business meeting, and we are currently convened in as the Budget Committee. We will move to the Department Budget Presentation, Housing, Waste Prevention, and Environmental Services. Today we will hear from our Housing Department and Waste Prevention and Environmental Services. Marisa, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you. Let's see. First up, come on up. We have Patricia Rojas, Director of Housing, Liam Frost, Deputy Director of Housing, Rachel Limbo from our Finance Department, and Emily Lieb.
Hello? Oh, this is on. Sorry. That was good. I can't ever see if that light is on. Good morning, Madam President, Metro Council. Thank you so much for having us this morning. We are pleased to be the first department this year to bring you our budget proposal for FY25. Next slide, please. Today we're going to share progress on investments from current fiscal year 23-24. We'll review our budget for 24-25, review progress on our performance measures, discuss progress with our equity metrics. We'll review investments in target areas, budget modifications for 24-25, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion. Next slide, please. The Housing Department is working hard to build a regional, person-centered system of care that delivers better outcomes for those that we serve. You've seen this slide in SHS presentations, but it also reflects the work of regionalization that the Housing Department is implementing every day. Creating a community where everyone has an affordable, safe, and stable place to call home requires working together. Jurisdictions, nonprofits, community members who are impacted by our services, all of us working together towards common goals and a shared vision for our community. Bringing communities together to accomplish big things on a regional scale is what Metro does best. Our 7 affordable housing bond implementation partners are working towards a shared vision and goals with shared guided principles that were informed by the community. Because of this regional partnership, there is now infrastructure, capacity, expertise, and shared practices in building affordable housing across the region, and we're collectively on track to exceed all production goals at all levels. And we're creating affordable housing in parts of the region where none existed before. And the Affordable Housing Bond has also created economic opportunities across the region. SHS is helping to break down silos and creating a regional system of care that will end homelessness for thousands of Oregonians and prevent homelessness for thousands more, and to get us to a future that quickly and effectively catches people that fall into homelessness and gets them into housing and services. Regionalization is more than an aspiration. It is a shared infrastructure, practices, collective problem solving that is operationalized and has tangible results. We have a lot more work to do, and we're strengthening our ability to deliver on that work with new infrastructure and staffing that is being built in the FY24 budget investments. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the FY24 work plan for the Housing Department. We worked with a consultant between spring of 2022 and winter of 2023 to support us in growing with intentionality and a focus on key areas that support our department in delivering on our commitments. We needed to establish foundational department infrastructure, positions, and functions that support these 2 relatively new Metro programs. With more bond units opening, reporting and data analysis demands have grown. Adding to the existing work of oversight, convening partners on a regular basis, supporting the work of the Oversight Committee, project approvals, improving our practices and procedures as advised by the auditor, and much more. We're grateful for your investment and in some very much needed additional capacity and administrative support for the bond team. We also needed additional leadership capacity to support our growing department. Departmental processes, procedures, internal and external equity work, administrative support that serves as the backbone of the work that takes place and makes so much of what we do possible. We now have an operations manager and an operations team that is working towards establishing those key processes and structures and is indeed supporting the entire department across the work. We also now have a communications manager and team that has been busy building the necessary tools to effectively tell the story of our work, communicate our progress, and more importantly, tell the stories of human lives being transformed by this work every day. Emily Lieb is now our policy director, who will help to lead and develop plans for advancing policy work as required by the bond and SHS, or as directed by council in the Office of the COO. And we also now have an equity manager who is working with our colleagues in DEI, and in only 2 months has already made improvements in how we engage in our monthly all-staff equity planning meetings, is developing plans and next steps to establish a foundation needed to achieve our equity goals, and is a valued member of our leadership team, participating in the development of this department. Next slide, please. SHS represents the largest area of growth. This is a version of a SHS work plan that we shared with you last year. Our goal for this year was to establish the necessary positions and structures to sustainably deliver on our promises and deliver excellent outcomes for those we serve. We're also filling significant gaps. We focused on building organizational infrastructure in 3 key areas. Regional policy, which is staffing for the development of the Tri-County Planning Body Regional Plan that regionalizes SHS. Consistent with the measure and the charter, the Tri-County Planning Body has identified 6 policy goals and is being developed and implemented as plans. With direction from the Tri-County Planning Body, Metro and County Staff Committee, work groups, and our team of consultants are working to develop those plans and incorporate that into a regional plan. The auditor's report highlighted the need to tighten up our oversight structures, such as data reporting, definitions, methodologies, program evaluation, monitoring, many improvements to our oversight practices. We now have filled all positions on the SHS data and compliance team and are working to make those improvements and launch new practices as required by SHS in monitoring and program evaluation. The other key areas of development was in technical assistance, organizational support, and training. Councilors Lewis and Wong wisely identified this need, as did the SHS Oversight Committee and Tri-County Planning Body. Additionally, this was an area that Washington and Clackamas counties requested Metro's assistance in. Regionalizing this work would allow counties to conserve capacity and systematize how technical assistance and training are delivered and accessed by providers. There are dozens of new and emerging service providers providing homeless services for the first time, and larger, more well-established organizations have experienced rapid growth and expanded services. This results in risks and gaps that are a challenge for the success of SHS. We've brought in Cole Merkel to manage and develop this team. This team will support grant programs that will provide support in critical areas such as HR, accounting, contracting, organizational development, training and best practices such as trauma-informed care and culturally responsive services, and many other areas. This team will convene, coordinate, host conferences with workshops that support and strengthen our network of providers. You've all received information about an RFQU to begin building this pool that will be shared across all 4 jurisdictions. A big thank you to Cole and our program coordinator, Ash Elberfeld, who was instrumental in getting this RFQU out into the world. And now I'll pass it to Liam to talk about the internal nuts and bolts of this growth.
Speaking of rapid growth, next slide, please. For the record, my name is Liam Frost. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm the Deputy Director of Housing, and it's nice to be with you all today, Madam President, councilors. The slide that you're seeing right now represents what you all approved for us last year, so thank you very much. And after that approval, we went to work rather quickly. As you can see, we've grown rapidly, but it's important to note that we've grown intentionally. The slide definitely represents your approval, but perhaps more importantly, it represents the work we're obligated to do by ballot measure, the work we're obligated to do by intergovernmental agreements and Metro Code, as well as the work that you all have asked us to accelerate. So this growth truly represents and fulfills our role as the housing department, while also at the same time contributing to Metro's vision for the region in the future. Over the last year, or the last 9 months, I should be more accurate, We've had to do a lot of mental gymnastics to recruit and hire this many people. It has been a continual exercise in critical path analysis, and we could not have done it without our HR partners, especially Megan Warnicki, who has been working with us every step of the way to accomplish this effort. What did we accomplish? Well, simply put, I believe personally that we've hired the best of the best in our department. We have subject matter experts throughout the entire department. Staff who are able to work with our partners in deep and meaningful programmatic and policy work. Right now, for example, we have Nuri Bazaar, Melissa Arnold, and Daisy Quinones working hand in hand with the COO's office, GAPD, our finance partners, synthesizing affordable housing and permanent supportive housing data in service of the next stakeholder advisory table meeting. So we have strength and depth now in a way that we didn't have previous to your approval of our budget this last year. As we set about hiring at the beginning of this fiscal year, we prioritized hiring managers first so that they could build their own teams and co-create their own paths forward with a vision set by our leadership team. And now our job, our priority internally at least, is to ensure stability for staff so that they can come to work every day and do their best work. We're fortunate to have an amazing new operations manager, Nancy Jason, who is leading a lot of the work around internal practices, procedures, and policies so that staff are not hampered by potentially inefficient internal processes. It will take time, but in some ways, because we're a toddler or even a tween department now, we have the opportunity to do it right, and that means doing it equitably. And thanks to Alexandra Appleton again for being an integral part of that work as we're launching it. To finish on this slide with these numbers here, to give you a status of our recruitments, we have 3 positions that are currently in recruitment on Cole Merkel's technical assistance and capacity team. They're trying to select for interviews as we speak. And we have 4 vacancies, 2 of which were taken by internal candidates. So there's been some movement internally in our department. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the progress through December of last calendar year of the SHS investments. And these numbers represent the work of our partners. And by partners, I mean nonprofit service providers across the region, as well as our county partners who have been hard at work every day building the cogs of this machine that did not exist before. And I think it's also worth taking a step back when we see these results and ask ourselves, well, what's our role here? We don't deliver these services. And I'm going to just say that it out loud because I think it's worth just putting on the table there. Our job is to ensure that counties are meeting their goals, and we do that through evaluation and monitoring, which we're about to launch, adding system capacity throughout the system through Cole's team, and setting consistent standards and expectations so that folks who are experiencing housing instability and homelessness can go from one county to another and expect the same level of service. And I think for our department, we also want to challenge the level of service. We want to improve that. And through the work of the Tri-County Planning Body, as Councillor Lewis is aware, one of the 6 goals, for example, is integrating housing services with healthcare, something that's never been done before here in the region, and I'm not sure how advanced it's been in the United States. We have Abby Ahern and Ruth Adkins working on that work right now. It's a huge body of work. Again, those are 2 experts on our team that are advancing that work. And I hope just that little chunk of an example right there, you can begin to see what we're talking about when we say regionalizing this work, what our role is in the Metro Housing Department, because it really is all about serving our folks better for as long as we possibly can and as many of those people as we possibly can. And now I'm going to hand it over to our Policy Director, Emily Lee.
Good afternoon, Metro Council President, Metro Council. Again, for the record, I'm Emily Lieb, she, her pronouns. I'm our Housing Policy Director. I'm going to share a few highlights from our affordable housing bond progress. Next slide, please. So as you can see, our affordable housing bond portfolio pipeline now includes 4,361 units. We have surpassed our initial goal of 3,900 units and are on track and expect to exceed those initial production goals by at least 20% when the funds are fully deployed. Very excited that we now have 1,410 units open and serving residents, and I think we need to update that number. This afternoon we will be celebrating the opening of Opal Apartments in Northwest Portland. This is a testament to the work of our small but mighty bond team, and want to give credit to Allison Wicks, Jimmy Oporta, and Mercedes Evangelista for all they do to support. They are looking at the details of every single one of these projects at multiple phases prior to construction and once the buildings are completed. We are also very excited to have approved our first 4 affordable homeownership program projects as part of the bond program over the past year. I will pass it over to Rachel.
Thanks, Emily. Good afternoon. I'm Rachel Lembo. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the finance manager for the housing department. Can we go to the next slide, please? We're now going to shift gears from talking about what we've been able to accomplish in the current year and talk about our proposed budget for FY25, starting with supporting housing services. You can see here that SHS will have an estimated $805 million in resources in FY25. This includes a $430 million beginning fund balance and $375 million in new tax revenue. So if you think back to maybe half an hour ago when Brian was presenting on the overall budget for Metro and why things are increasing, this is one of those reasons why, right? So it's not just the new revenue coming in, but also that we have this carryover, which is the beginning fund balance.
Rachel, is the beginning balance a combination of multiple fiscal years, or is that?
Yeah, it's the cumulative amount. Okay. So it's what we expect to end the current fiscal year with. The pie chart that you see here shows how these resources will be used in the proposed budget. It's important to note that our county partners are currently working through their own budget processes. So the amount shown here for partner implementation is our estimate of their expenses based on our 5-year forecast from the fall. At that time, that forecast assumed that their annual ongoing operations would be nearly fully ramped up by FY25 and that they would have significant investments of carryover in FY25. This chart also shows specific reserves for tax stabilization and the RIF, the Regional Investment Fund, and it shows a contingency other reserve. This is related to both Metro and our county partners, and this amount could be accessed in FY25 or could be carried over to fund future investments in future years. And at the very top of the chart, you'll see the Metro admin is $15 million, and we'll break that down next. Next slide, please. So here you can see that $15 million budget for Metro admin shown by the divisions that Patricia described previously. Each team includes personnel, materials and services for external costs such as consultants to support policy development, spaces to host job fairs and conferences, and experts to assist with program evaluation. Indirect costs of central services are shown allocated to each division and to tax collection and partner costs. One change to mention that is that in FY25, the communications team will be moving into the housing department from the central communications department where it currently sits. That just shifts where it is reflected in the budget. It does not shift those actual costs, just that they are now directly in the housing department instead of part of that indirect central services cost. Next slide, please. Moving on to the affordable housing bond. AHB will have an estimated $363 million in resources in FY25, primarily from bond proceeds and prior year interest earnings. This does include just under $1 million in general fund support, and we'll speak more on that in just a moment when we discuss the proposed budget modifications. This pie chart shows how the resources are used in the proposed budget. Partner implementation and site acquisition program costs are based on the forecasted pipeline of projects, and the funding and the contingency other reserve pie slice shows the amount that will be carried forward to fund future year projects. Next slide, please. On that previous slide, it showed Metro's admin costs as $3.4 million in FY25. That's shown here and includes the costs of oversight and program administration from pre-construction through lease-up, including review of project proposals, monitoring and evaluations of projects and outcomes, partner support and engagement, communications, and policy development. It also includes the costs of the site acquisition program team and a portion of the housing department leadership, operations, communications, and equity team. With that, I'll pass it back to Patricia.
Thank you, Rachel. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to turn to performance measures. For SHS, this is the number of households placed in permanent supportive housing, which is the 5,000 goal. the number of households stabilized through rapid rehousing or eviction prevention, which is the 10,000 goal, and then the number of bond units completed or under construction. As this is an area that I do before I get into the actual numbers, the auditor has pointed out that we have some work to do here on methodologies and definitions. And so we will, in this year, as I mentioned, with Yesenia's team and the and folks that are on the data team now to make those improvements. But this is information that we have received from our partners. For the affordable housing bond, as of December of 23, there were 52 bond-funded projects underway that will provide 4,361 new affordable homes. These homes represent 112% of the bond's total unit production target of 3,900 affordable units. Of these, 1,410 units have completed construction and 1,374 units are under construction. Another 1,577 units have received a funding commitment and are in planning or permitting. And then, as I can see here, for permanent supportive housing for the 5,000 goal, as of December of 23, we have served 4,806 individuals. And for the 10,000 goal, we have served 22,175 individuals. And again, for that number in particular, there was braided funding because of ARPA. And so there was emergency funds for rent assistance that were braided in, which allowed us to serve collectively more people. Next slide, please. And I'll pass it to Emily.
Yeah. Can I ask a question on the last slide?
Oh, sure.
And I think the fact that you mentioned the braiding it helps maybe explain some of it. But just a real simple question when I think about the population A and population B, 75% to 25% focus that we wanted to have on population A. Maybe the green square doesn't necessarily equate to population B and the blue square to A and then the blue square to B, but the skewing of the 75% doesn't, I'm not seeing the congruency in terms of the kind of voter mandated emphasis there. So is that something that we expect to balance out over time or again, I think I'm curious to hear about how the prioritization is happening. And,
yes.
Yes. Anyway, yeah. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Do you want me to answer that right now? Or?
Yeah. Go ahead. There might be more questions later, but this slide was really helpful just to see the ratio of what has been performed to date versus what our original intent was, and it feels flipped on its head.
Absolutely. And so I think that the first of all, to the first part of your question, the 5,000 and the 10,000 do not 100%, but they largely are Pop A and Pop B. Okay. So population A and PSH, we are reserving PSH as much as possible for population A. So folks that have experienced chronic homelessness for the most part. And then population B would be rapid rehousing and eviction prevention. So rapid rehousing could also be for folks that are experiencing unsheltered or sheltered homelessness, and we get them back into housing, but they do not meet the requirements of chronically homeless, which is a disability and little to no income. So those are relatively speaking Pop A and Pop B. Again, with the caveat that we have some work to do with our partners in how we are aligning definitions and methodologies in our implementation. Okay. And then to your latter part of your question on the funding, so the population A, the PSH work requires development. We have to have units to place people in, and that work just takes longer to get folks who have experienced chronic homelessness into housing. It will be, I'll just say over time, is the much more expensive per household approach. And the rent assistance is we're able to serve more people in a shorter amount of time. And I'll just say is equally as important if we're really trying to get in front of the curve of seeing just the volume of inflow that we've been having. So over time, that will shift where the money is. And our goal and expectation is that by the end of the 10 years, that will actually pan out to the 75 and 25. And we are monitoring. And so we are working with counties. Last year, they gave us their first Pop A and B financial investment report. Again, because of the methodologies, we've got some work to do. It is going to be a key area with our data team and our compliance team to make those improvements. But that is something that we are watching.
Can I add 2 sentences?
Sure.
Just to add extra context, the number of folks who received eviction prevention help the vast majority happened during the very depths of the pandemic when folks were not paying rent, when folks were at risk of eviction during that point. I think we might see it level off a little bit, but given the market right now, it's still going to be a big demand, as well as the actual mechanics of providing rental assistance to prevent evictions is a lot simpler and more basic than providing PSH. That takes growth in infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that it feels like there's a policy question there for further discussion that I welcome to continue having. But in general, also, I think that the work with the task force that we're looking at is also, I mean, really well informed by what you're saying to give us the capacity and the energy to deliver the places that we need to place folks, especially with.
Absolutely.
So, anyway, thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks for letting me interject, President Peterson.
Can I ask a question about the slide, the back slide? Initially, when we set goals in terms of households, and now we're reporting in terms of individuals, did we have an idea of what we meant by a household? I think when we set the goals, in other words, number of people, when you're comparing two different kinds of data, it's always a little confusing.
Yes, this is exactly what the auditor pointed out, is that in some places we had shown households and people. These, and we're working with the auditor, we're working with partners. They actually should be households. But for the purposes of this presentation, sharing how many people have been placed, that is, I think, really important. We are working to actually correct this and send some guidance to the counties this May, in just a few weeks, about this particular area. And so it'll all be households.
Yeah, I realize it's complicated because each unit has a certain number of multiple family, single family units. We just did a TOD on where it's all single person apartments, and so it's highly variable. But okay, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Both of our funding measures include a policy goal to ensure access for BIPOC and other historically marginalized communities that have disproportionate need for services and affordable housing. And a key metric that we're tracking is racial demographics of occupants of bond-funded buildings. We collect this data one time following the full occupancy. We collect this data following full occupancy of the building. So at this time, we have data for the first 10 buildings to complete the leasing process. These are cumulative numbers, and they only reflect the responses we receive, which are not from all occupants. But as of December 2023, you can see that 48% of occupants of bond-funded buildings were people of color. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry.
Emily, before we move on, I wanted to just make a note for SHS equity metrics. Even though Multnomah County, for example, is at approximately 50-50 serving white populations and BIPOC populations, which we can break that down if you would like. Overall, as a system, we are at 65.3% white populations, and the rest being a mix. So 2.5 Asian or Asian American, 15.2 Black and African American, 27.2 Latin, 5% American Indian, Alaska Native or Indigenous, and then 4.4% Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander. And the rest are more in the unknown population. We didn't get enough information from those participants, but we have some work as a region is really the takeaway from this number of 65% to get to the place where we really are serving BIPOC households at equal or greater rates than their white counterparts.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, next slide, please. The work of the Housing Department is advancing the strategic goals set by Council related to housing, climate, and the economy. The current bond portfolio represents $2.2 billion in investments, of which over $1 billion is leveraged from other sources. This investment portfolio, which does not yet reflect the final funding commitments, is expected to support over 3,200 construction jobs and many more jobs across other industries, including architects, property managers, service providers, and more. For the first 10 bond projects to complete construction, approximately 1/4 of construction dollars were paid to state certified minority and women owned businesses and emerging small businesses, exceeding Metro, and we're currently on track with that number to exceed Metro and our partners' goal of at least 20% of dollars being paid to MWESB firms. Many bond projects pursue Earth Advantage certification and commonly achieve the silver, gold, or platinum levels. About 2/3 of projects also participate in Oregon Housing and Community Services Multifamily Energy Program, which provides financial incentives for affordable housing projects to achieve energy efficiency measures. On the slide you see on the left, Hattie Redmond in North Portland is a great example of how these strategic goals are coming together in a specific site. This is a culturally specific permanent supportive housing project in North Portland, developed by Home Forward and operated, and the Urban League, and operated through a partnership with Urban League to provide culturally responsive services to African Americans and older African American adults. This receives funding from the Supportive Housing Services measure to support those culturally responsive services. On the right, you see Winwot Commons, which was developed by Albertina Kerr in Gresham. This is the largest net zero affordable housing project in the Northwest, and it's providing deeply affordable supportive housing to adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as homes for human service workers serving that population who unfortunately also struggle to afford housing on the private market. So great examples of how these strategic goals are coming together through our investments. I will pass it to Rachel, sorry.
Next slide, please. We are almost at the end of our presentation, and I'm now going to highlight the budget modifications that have been included in our 25 proposed budget. As you recall, the admin cap on the affordable housing bond meant that Metro would need to contribute general fund to the bond program to maintain the current level of administration and oversight. As this chart shows, the affordable housing bond is forecasted to run out of bond-funded admin in FY27. However, last year, Council recommended that staff come back this year with an annual ask for the remaining years of the program. This means the ask is $950,000 a year, rather than almost $2 million a year if we waited until FY27. While all bond funds will be committed by Metro Concept endorsement by the end of 2024, there is significant remaining work to deliver on obligations and commitments established in the Council-approved Affordable Housing Bond Work Plan. These commitments extend through financial close and groundbreaking into 2026, and as projects complete construction and reach full occupancy in 2029. Next slide, please. Our second budget modification is for $150,000 in one-time general fund to support a regional housing strategy. This is housing's portion of a joint effort with the Planning, Development, and Research Department, and will build on related efforts underway this year, including PD&R's work on a regional housing needs analysis and growth management plan, and housing's work to assess the affordable housing funding and production landscape and evaluate future regional funding opportunities. One FTE is requested in housing communications. This position will be a social media and multimedia specialist who will create high-level multimedia content, both for our housing department and to support the housing work in the region overall. Finally, the 5 limited duration positions currently in housing are requested to be extended by 1 year through June of 2026. This concludes our budget presentation, and we are happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you. Counselors, questions? Raise your hand on the virtual screen, if you could.
Madam President.
Yep, thank you. Counselor Nolan.
Thanks. Quick crosswalk. I had understood that the department was requesting 5 additional communications positions this year, but I think I just heard you say 1.
Just 1. So our communications FTE are moving from central comms into housing. So if you look at last year's budget for this compared to this year's budget, It does look like it's increasing, but they're just moving. The only new position is the 1 position that I just mentioned for multimedia.
Thanks for clarifying.
Councilor Rosenthal and then Lewis.
Yeah, I have one quick question, and then I have a sort of more general comment. But the question is, why is Central Comms moving into housing? I'm not quite sure I understand that. And then I have a bit more extensive comment that I have to make based on a meeting this morning.
Councilor Rosenthal, I'm sorry if I misspoke. It is not Central Comms. It is the Housing Communications team that currently sits in Central Communications that will move into the Housing Department. So these are communication staff who work directly with our department and our work.
So we'll end up with 6 people doing housing communications. That's correct. Okay. I just want to make it clear. But we will have a communications department in addition to that outside of housing, yes?
There will still be, you'll hear this. We are the first department to speak to you, but you will hear this from other departments as well, where if they have a department specific communications team, it is going to move into the department next fiscal year. There will still be a central communications team, but it'll be very small. It'll be running the Metro website, coordinated Metro news, but it won't be doing department specific work.
My general comment is that I said, I'm sorry, did you have something?
Yes, thank you, Councilor Rosenthal. Just to add some additional context, that movement of staff into departments is really to reflect staff who are only doing work for a specific department will now be paid for by that department. Previously, everybody was together and it was paid for by a fee that every part of Metro paid. Now, the cost of central communications will be charged out to everybody, but the cost of specific departments will be borne by those specific departments for communication. So we'll talk more about it as we go through the process, but just wanted to clarify that that's why you see people moving. We're trying to make sure that things that are being paid centrally really do serve everyone, and things that are department specific or departments.
Yeah, I was just concerned because of the way it was presented, it almost sounded like all of comms was moving into housing, and I would have some concerns over that. But a general thing, I attended the WEA meeting this morning, and there were representatives of Home Forward and the county and home builders, both market rate as well as subsidized home builders and the Home Builders Association and so forth. And what struck me most is that, I thought, the startup period, the first couple of years was going to be the most difficult, but I think we're actually entering an even more complicated and difficult phase because we're trying to deal with both housing and supportive services and how we move forward on this. And listening to the people this morning, I realized that everybody has a different solution. There was a guy that talked about, he represented construction, and he said, well, this is a moral and an economic question. It's also a practical question because people don't like to see what looks like a chaotic society around them. So there's a lot of issues that are going on and going forward. And what I sort of want to say is that we've invented an airplane that's taken off, and now we're as a counselor, and I'm not an expert in the housing field, and I don't deal with it every day. I deal with it sort of periodically. I realize that everybody has different opinions and different perspectives. The county has a very different, slightly different perspective than I have. So I'm not going to. I think the people you've shown a great deal of success so far. We've shown a great deal of success collectively, and so at this point, we sort of, in one sense, have to avoid, at least I have to avoid kibitzing on the details, because I think we're taking off and we're doing good things and the challenges are there, but I can't predict how, if we put more money into, say, vouchers, which is one person suggested, just make everything a voucher program and put people in retail market housing. There's a whole bunch of balances that go on that only you staff and people who would deal with this on a day-to-day basis can really make these corrections. So I'm pretty happy with the kind of progress you made, and I'm going to be pretty happy with the kind of recommendations you made for going forward in your budget. So I just want to say I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I want to thank the team not only for the thought that you've put into this presentation, but the thought that you've put into intentionally building a team that can do the work we need to do, centering communities, centering the lived experience. Everybody comes into homelessness with their own story, their own challenges, and everybody resolves through a unique set of additional income and or subsidized units and help to reach that unit. So we have a 41 person team, plus or minus 3 or 4. And we have 52% of our budget being overseen by this small skeleton team. So just to put that in perspective, the other half of Metro's budget is being overseen by over 1,100 people. So while you have experienced rapid growth and you suddenly feel quite large, you are still quite small. So just wanting to add that perspective, since it feels like rapid growth, since it feels like you have reached a moment of plenty, you're still going to be stretched in challenges in ways that we can't anticipate. And I guess for me, the question that I know your $150,000 is matched by the planning department, but we do really intentional planning process at Metro. Like, the one thing we do well is plan. Sometimes we fail and fall on our face on the execution. Is $150,000 enough to plan for housing for the region, not just for the deeply affordable, not just for the people in Pop A or Pop B? Is it really enough? And is the plan that we're going to do something that we can stand by and answers the question, what does housing in this region really look like for everyone? What does affordability mean for people who don't hit that Pop A and Pop B, but still really need the government to think about how are they going to afford a place to live?
That is a fantastic question, and I'll start and ask my colleagues to hop in here. First of all, thank you for the observation and the comment on a rapidly growing department and, relatively speaking to the scope of what we're doing, relatively small to that. And so I appreciate that. Just as a comment to that, we are taking a moment as we are staffing up, and we're almost to our goal of hiring the 22 folks that we said we would, which is, I just want to say, remarkable. It has been all hands on deck effort. We'll need to actually observe and analyze how that actually meets the needs, the current, because a lot of that is based on current need. And we are in a rapidly changing environment, and we will want to be responsive as things shift, as we see how well the staff or the positions we've put into place are actually responding. And if we see additional things emerge and needs emerge for new capacity, I will work with the COO's office, and we will together work with you to strategize how we meet those additional needs. So I just wanted to address that part. To the second part of your question of is $150,000 enough for a plan? I think in my mind that $150,000 is for initial work with the planning department. I think to your question, I think it would be much more. I think we will require more to actually do the whole comprehensive body of work. But I think for this initial part of research and the work with planning in particular, and I'm going to look at Rachel and Emily here, that is where we feel like we needed to start. That was the shared work between the two departments.
So just to add to that, the total budget proposed is $300,000 between the two departments, and for as Rachel mentioned, that work will be building on and leveraging work that's already underway to support the stakeholder conversation about funding measure opportunity or funding opportunities for affordable housing, understanding the landscape, the current production pipeline. There is work that is already underway that was supported with our current year's budget that's going to feed into that regional housing plan. That said, we have more work to do to fully build out and scope that work, and so we will definitely take that into consideration as we do that. And
one other thought on this is that this is an interesting moment in time with planning because we have the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis that's intersecting the work around a regional housing plan. And so I think there are lots of components. We're doing technical work right now that will actually be leveraged for said plan. So there are multiple bodies of work happening that we have to align and coordinate to be able to then figure out if there is anything else that's missing. But we have a lot to work with right now. And then we'll have to reassess as those components come together to figure out what else is needed to get to the plan that we need.
And at the risk of extending this even further, I just want to say that we're working on a number of exciting things in the housing department, but I would say this is top 3 for me. This is something that I've worked on both the affordable housing side and the homeless services side. This is the first time in my career where there's an opportunity to leverage the wisdom of both. I was on a call with Councillor Nolan and Councillor Wong early this morning in preparation for the next MPAC meeting with planning staff. The last thing I'll say is when you work in homeless services, it is not lost on anyone about the forces that create that homelessness and those folks losing their homes. We're developing a triage emergency system at the housing department. We want to work with our colleagues at the planning department so we can address the entire continuum.
Can I ask for clarification? I did not hear that we were actually looking from the entirety of the need for housing. I heard we're doing affordable within the realm of the two departments that are here. As we, is that correct? I'll just stop there.
So I think, thank you for the question, Council President. I think that where we are starting is trying to understand, I think this is more of a question responding to Councillor Wong in our annual report presentation that, Councillor, you brought up. You know, housing, when we talk about housing, affordable housing, it does not exist in a vacuum from everything else, middle housing and other parts of the housing landscape and funding landscape. So when we identify what the needs are for a particular area like affordable housing, we also need to take into account the other parts of the housing landscape and how what's missing, who are the funders that could be a part of that work. And so it is a more comprehensive body of work. And initially, because of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, which is also, again, more comprehensive than affordable housing, it is where we are. It is an opportunity for us to dovetail with that work to be able to tell the story of what is the need more comprehensively and where affordable housing sits in that broader landscape. So I think it's a bigger story that needs to be told on a regular basis so that we can understand the policy needs and have the information that you need to make decisions into the future. So when we have a next conversation about how are we going to fill any particular need, you have that data at hand.
All right, I'm just going to say I'm not clear on this yet, so I'll follow up with you. I recognize that this program can only put their money towards X amount of the work. I'm not sure where the rest of the work lies, who's in charge of it, the overall look, and how that fits not only into our urban growth report work that's going on, and because I don't want two studies that are pointing in different directions, and then we have to clear it up, and then how that fits into these, basically the scoping for Metro 2040 update. So it's just, I understand this money can only be used for X. But we all know that we are lacking everything, which is then pushing the pressure on this side of the equation. And if we just make assumptions about affordable to a certain percentage of the population, you're saying you're taking into account like a compression that's going on, but we also have responsibility to make sure that that compression does not happen.
Right.
So,
just a last comment on that. This is the partnership between housing and planning, and so we are
hearing the specifics. So I'll just follow up with you.
Sounds good.
Okay. President Peterson, just very specifically, we can make sure that before planning comes to do their presentation, that we've incorporated this feedback and this question so that we can put what housing is doing in that context.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wong.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to the team. Great work. It's heartening to see the progress. And I want to kind of call back two of the interventions that this council has made in the last couple years, and I'm heartened to see kind of the development of the capacity building team. I think Councilor Lewis and I worked on that, and it seems like there's broad general alignment across the region. And we all know that capacity building means a lot of things. It could mean technical assistance, but it also means other supports in terms of administrative capacity or all that sort of thing. And I'm wondering if you can speak to how we now will fund that work. And I see that there are staff positions, which is really important, but just having a person talk to an organization is not enough in capacity building. So what is it that we can do to build capacity building or to build capacity, and where is that those resources coming from? Is it from kind of that flexible fund? Is it from the counties? Like, how is that support going to actually build capacity?
I feel like you've answered your own questions in some ways there, Councillor Wong. Just to confirm, the FTE are supported by Metro's 5% admin fund. How, once Cole and his team have developed the vision for the work that they will actually engage in, we will then make a recommendation on which source of funding we could potentially use. We could potentially use Metro's 5% admin funding. We could potentially use the Regional Investment Fund, and we could potentially use some of the county's own SHS allocations, depending on if we are adding value to the counties in a way that they have perhaps asked us to take on some of the work that they already do. So there's some decision making that needs to happen in the future once Cole and his team have developed that work plan.
And that would potentially require a future budget amendment?
Potentially, yes, depending on which course we want to
Thank you. And actually, the other intervention that we had that actually Councilor Lewis and I also worked on was we, in the first year, forgave the penalties and fees in tax collection. Is that right? We did, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, we did. And, you know, we have the annual, around this time in tax season, the annual round of folks that come to us because they didn't know that they had to pay, or that, you know, CPAs are complaining about something in the process. And, you know, I noticed that a good chunk of money is going towards the tax collection. So I'm wondering if you could explain more about how we're working to alleviate the annual concerns that we see every year, and also are we still giving notice to every resident that they may have to pay? So just how are we improving our collection mechanism?
Oh, thank you.
I can kick it off a little bit before Brian. Also, well, I unfortunately cannot promise you that you're not going to receive phone calls from taxpayers. We've made, I think, some really huge strides. So for one, for those who file with TurboTax, which is one of the most popular tax filing softwares, our tax is now in that software. So I think that the chance of it truly being a surprise for people has gone down drastically. We did send out a postcard again this year. The postcard both reminds people that they may be subject to this tax and also lets them know the great outcomes of this program. And the last thing I'll add is that we have really grown our tax team. This is the first time Metro has had an income tax, as you know. And so it was a little challenging for us in the beginning, but we have really grown that team that's led by Josh Harwood, our tax and fiscal policy director, and they are very engaged with local businesses, with CPAs, with the city of Portland, who is our tax administrator. And so I think some of the shock and surprise that came up that first year is decreasing significantly each year we get further along into this tax. Brian, what would you add?
That is perfect. I think the two things I would add. One is we've also, in working with the city, put a big emphasis on making sure that local employers are doing required withholding, because that is another really important signal to potential taxpayers that they may owe this. So I think we have a very comprehensive package of outreach to potential taxpayers. I think the thing we have to remember is that the goal here is, we can say the goal is zero people being surprised, but that is not an achievable goal. And the biggest part of the problem is there are taxpayers who are only in that tax bracket for 1 year. They have some sort of, personal financial event. They, get a big bonus at work, or have inheritance, or sell a piece of property. They move into that tax bracket. A lot of times those particular types of transactions aren't going to result in withholding. So they're not getting any communication from their employer about the need to potentially have this tax. So we will continue to do all the things we can to make sure that people know having an TurboTax is a really big step. And just know that we'll try to get that number as small as possible, but we will never reach every single person because of the way this tax is structured.
Understood. And the budget does have a number around the postcards for next fiscal year. Is that an ongoing practice now?
I think we'll look at it and see if it's having an impact, a positive impact in number of calls. Let's say personally, I'm skeptical of the use of the impact that there are a couple issues. So we send postcards to everyone, so we kind of alarm people who will probably never have to pay the tax that they might have to pay the tax, which is somewhat counterproductive. It's the amount of attention people give to their mail, I think, has changed over time. So whether people actually look at it is questionable. And then the other big challenge is because of our sourcing rules, there are people subject to the tax who don't actually live in the region, so we can't get a postcard to them. And so I think some of the people you may end up hearing from are people that live outside the metro region, but because their income is earned here, they're subject to it.
I do appreciate Rachel's comments around some of the progress that's being made in terms of that's part of the messaging. So I do think that is a benefit. But thank you.
Awesome. Can I just take a minute before we go on to Councilor Rosenthal's question? I think part of the echoing that we're hearing in the chamber might be that the mics are too loud and probably need to come down just slightly. Brian, you were perfect when you sat 2.5 feet away. So thank you. If we could just dial that back, that would be great. Thanks. All right, Councilor Rosenthal.
Yeah, thank you. The discussion over the comms communications got me thinking about one other area. Housing and this whole process is very data heavy and it requires a lot of use of data and a lot of kinds of data that we haven't always gathered before, and collecting it from 3 counties and trying to rectify their different ways of collecting data. So I'm just a little curious as to why we haven't moved a chunk from the planning department of the data acquisition group into housing, parallel to what we've done with comms, because it would seem that the data they're collecting and using is a little bit more specialized than the kinds of data we've gathered on environmental matters and so forth, or solid waste. I mean, they're all different buckets, but can you give some thinking on that? And do we have enough staff to actually manage the data correctly? And is that something that we should be thinking of a budget amendment for?
Well, I think there are a couple of questions in there. I think first one is about planning and development and the research centers. I heard it, like why have we moved staff from the research center? And I'm going to look towards Marisa and Rachel to speak to some of that. Yeah.
Our research department, I'll just say there's a lot of ways. Sorry, look at me if I'm echoing too much. I'm trying to sit further back. There's a lot of different ways to allocate shared costs. So communications, one way we did it in the current year was we had it centralized and we allocated it through the cost allocation plan. Next year, we're going to charge them directly. Our research center is similar in that they're a shared asset of the entire agency, and different departments use them for different reasons. But because they have so much work that is related to our planning department with transportation and land use, they're housed within the PD&R department, and where they support other departments, we essentially do an internal billing process for that. So if housing didn't have access to them, maybe they would have to hire a data consultant or something to reach out to. So it's just a different methodology. Housing does have access to that research team. The bond team actually has used them extensively, and it's been very helpful with that. With supportive housing services, there has been some use, but I think we may see more in the future. And we've also been we've really seen a need for some staff positions that work in data, but have some real housing expertise as well, because part of the management of the data is the quality control. And so we really were looking for people who could help us define what that quality control would look like. And so that's where we have added staff within our own department that focus on data. We have 2 staff. One has been here for maybe 3 months and one has been here for maybe 3 weeks. So still fairly new, but we have both team members within our department and access to the research center. Patricia, would you add anything to that?
Yes, I'll just say that so much of the team is newly established, and so to the point that we have just a couple of folks in data right now, and both are very new. We'll be spending the next several months implementing those roles and evaluating the needs. I would fully expect over time the need for more capacity. I think that we're very early on right now, and so we're kind of in the infancy stages of SHS data. As we look at potentially new systems or new technology for HMIS and the partnership evolving, I think there will be more needs, and I think there will be plenty of opportunity also to potentially partner with the research center. A conversation that I've begun with Catherine already, but I don't know if Marisa, if you had any thoughts about PD&I?
No, I think we all handle it well. We will be talking about not specific to housing, but some centralization that we're doing of data resources into FRS, but we'll be talking about that when Brian comes to present for finance.
Yeah, from my standpoint, I do care. I prefer to see a research department separate, but that's another matter. But at this point in time, as Rachel noted, it requires special expertise in terms of quality control. So I just want to see going forward that we have provisions, whether it's in the research department, the planning department, or in your separate department, to deal with that effectively, because it's not going to get easier.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. We have no more questions. I think if you guys have any follow-up summary statements or not.
Well, I will just say, first of all, thank you for your support over the last 3 years as we've been implementing SHS and longer with the bond. I think that we have accomplished a lot to Councilor Rosenthal's, your observations of the successes, and we have a lot more work to do. We have some challenges up ahead, and I think that together we're going to figure out what the best pathway forward is, and we look forward to coming back to you on the policy questions, on additional organizational needs as they emerge, but we just very much so appreciate the time and the engagement and the support that you've given to the department. Thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated. We look forward to more talk about this, but thank you for moving us to this point. All right. We'll move on to WPEZ and Martin and team. And team.
We'll test the microphones out.
Yeah. Is that better for folks? I mean, there's still an echo. I don't know if we actually got turned down.
I did turn down the mics here up on the dais a little bit, and as well for you guys. But I am still hearing a little echo.
Yeah. So if you can just sit back from your mics just a little bit, it helps. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Council President Peterson and councilors. Again, my name is Marta McGuire. I'm Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Director, and I use she, her pronouns. I have here with me our department's finance manager, Patrick Dennis, and our deputy director, Carrie Stacy. We're really pleased to be here today to share with you the details of our proposed budget and second in the lineup of the department budget presentations. Next slide. Oh, there's no slides yet.
Should be coming up in just a second here now. There we go.
So here's just a quick overview of what we intend to cover in the budget presentation today, very similar to the components of the housing budget presentation. Next slide. First, I just want to start with that I'm very proud to represent the nearly more than 200 staff who are part of the Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Department. We provide a diverse portfolio of programs and services, and this is truly an incredible group of talented and passionate individuals that are dedicated to serving the communities in the region. Next slide. Our primary mission is to protect people in the environment, and we keep our region clean by making sure that garbage is disposed of safely and the items that can be reused or recycled go on to have useful lives. Public, private, and nonprofit partners play a vital role in completing our mission, and today we will be delivering a budget we'll be sharing a budget to deliver on our responsibilities. Our operating budget falls into the 3 program areas that you see up here: regional garbage and recycling operations. We manage 2 public transfer stations in the St. John's landfill. services and community investments, and this includes cleaning up garbage in communities and advancing waste reduction through grants, partnerships, and education. And finally, planning and partnerships. This is much of the work that we do with cities and counties to reduce the impacts of waste through policy and regulation. Because these are key areas of investment to fulfill our mission, I want to take a moment to share some of the key highlights of our progress from this last year. Next slide. Over the last 2 years, our primary focus has been on restoring levels of service following the disruption of the pandemic. And we've made great progress. Since the closure of schools during the pandemic and adaptation to the virtual space, we are now back in the classroom. And together with our partners, reached nearly 30,000 students in 2023. You had the opportunity to hear directly from Dr. Jamie Rapaski on our school-based education program. She's featured here in the photo as a part of the Regional System View presentation last month. We know our collection events are heavily in demand, and we exceeded this year's targets. Metro hosted 50 events this year, including both large and small scale. That's nearly doubling the number of large-scale events from last year. In addition, we maintained our 2-day response time for cleanup and made a long-term investment in the program with the purchase of the RID Deployment Center. Next slide. We've also made great progress on key policy projects within our planning and partnerships work. This includes the completion of phase 2 of the system facilities plan that is shaping future investments to modernize the garbage and recycling system. You see here the photo here from the fall symposium that many of you had the opportunity to attend. We also completed the pilot project to improve service standards for bulky waste, and we'll be back to you in the coming months to share the findings of the pilot project and talk about next steps. In addition, we launched the Disaster Reserve Grant Program that will provide relief for local governments with the management of debris as a result of the storm events that happened this winter. Next slide. Within garbage and recycling operations, safety and maintaining our assets is a top priority. We have also made great progress on the point of sale system replacement. The contract with the new vendor is signed, and we expect full implementation in the fall. We have also worked actively to implement the audit recommendations, completing all of the safety trainings. The photo in the middle is an emergency response training for our household hazardous waste team that I got to shadow with them. And it really just further impressed upon me the level of skill and expertise that this team holds in the way that they manage and ensure that materials are disposed of safely each day. At the same time, our transfer stations continue to provide excellent service daily, handling thousands of transactions each week. As we look ahead to next year, we want to continue to maintain these levels of service and complete key policy projects. With that, we can go to the next slide, and I will turn it over to Patrick to walk through the details of our proposed budget.
Thank you, Marta. Good afternoon, Metro Council President and Metro Councilors. My name is Patrick Dennis. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the Finance Manager for WPES. I have a couple of slides to briefly walk you through the WPES FY 24-25 proposed budget. Next slide, please. The total budget being proposed for consideration for FY 24-25 is $162.2 million. There are 3 components on the screen that make up this total budget. We have the operating portion of the budget, which is $131.9 million. Our budgeted capital outlay at $3.2 million, and contingency and reserve, which totals $27.2 million. Within the operating budget, there is $32.5 million for personnel services expenses. This will pay for the 201.3 FTE that are included in the proposed budget. The FY 24-25 budget is requesting 9.4 more FTE than the FY 23-24 adopted budget. Of these 9.4 new FTE, 7 are communication staff. So similarly to what we just heard in the housing department, 7 staff that already existed within the Central Services Communications Department that were working on WPES related projects will now be directly embedded in the WPES department's budget. The remaining 2.4 FTE will support station operations and the Recycling Information Center, and Marta will speak in more detail about these 2.4 FTE later in the presentation. Of the $78.7 million budgeted in materials and services, about 70% or $56 million is directly related to the solid waste operations contract costs for Metro Central and Metro South. The remaining materials and services supports the diverse body of work that Metro provides, the region of which Marta will provide more details about later in the presentation as well. $20.7 million is budgeted for central services and the construction project manager support from CAM, or the Capital Asset Management Department. WPES's contribution for central services is based on a consistent methodology to recover central services costs that are provided to WPES, like FRS, HR, IT, and other departments that support WPES. For FY 24-25, $3.2 million is being budgeted in capital A outlay for capital projects, and we will look at the associated projects on the following slide. Finally, the $27.2 million in contingency and reserves represents two components. It has WPES's 45-day operating reserve of $15.8 million. This operating reserve is based on guidance from GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, and the remaining $11.4 million is reserved for St. John's landfill, pollution remediation, and landfill closure expenses. Just like the WPES operations are now separated into two separate sub-funds to track regional system fee funded activities and transfer fee related activities, in FY 24-25, capital projects will also be separated into two distinct sub-funds. Next slide, please. This is the list of projects for the 24-25 portion of the 5-year capital improvement plan, where we have $3.2 million budgeted. On the left side of the screen, you'll see projects that are funded by the regional system fee, of which we have two that are identified currently in the CIP. Both are related to the St. John's landfill for bridge repair and office relocation. And then on the right side, we have the projects funded by mixed solid waste fees. As you can see, there are 5 projects. The biggest project, at least related to cost, is the Metro South office and break room. So moving forward, WPES will keep capital projects separated based on their funding sources to continue to provide transparency within our budget. Now I'll turn it back to Marta, who will walk through key budget and equity metrics that we are using to measure performance and progress.
You can go to the next slide. Right, and the next slide after that. Thank you. As you know, our work is guided by the Regional Waste Plan, which is the vision for the Greater Portland's garbage and recycling system. And this slide features our strategic priorities that reflect the plan values and align with the Council's strategic target areas. On the left, you'll see the strategic priorities. In the middle, the indicators of progress. And on the right, our progress to date with the reporting year of 2022. Our key equity metrics are highlighted in yellow. I want to take a moment to share some of these key measures. Some of this may look familiar to you, as we shared many of them in the Regional Progress Report earlier this year. Next slide. The first area is around fostering inclusive prosperity and workforce equity. One key indicator we look to is median wage. This indicator reflects progress toward our goal with the median wage for employees of color growing by 13% for managers and professionals and 10% for frontline workers. This is encouraging, but more progress is needed. Currently, the data covers workers employed by Metro or by Recology, which is the employee-owned company that operates the Metro 2 transfer stations under contract. In future years, we hope to incorporate wage and demographic data for workers in other sectors of the industry, including private facilities and collection companies. Next slide. The next indicator focuses on our goals for reducing the impact of trash and improving services. In the short term, we have seen significant progress in the collection of dumped garbage. The data show in 2022, the tons of dumped garbage cleaned up by our RID program increased significantly compared to prior years. Over the long term, however, the goal for this indicator is to see a decrease in the tons of dumped garbage needing to be cleaned up as a reflection of consistent, affordable, and convenient services. Next slide. Next, I would like to highlight a new measure of the capacity and impact of the reuse and repair sectors. Increasing the capacity to recover goods for reuse is instrumental in reaching our waste prevention goals and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Using state and business data, coupled with a recent study by Metro on large item reuse, we're able to develop an estimate of the capacity of the reuse and repair sectors in the region so we can start to track their expansion. Based on this, we estimate that more than 150,000 tons of materials were collected by the reuse sector across the region. That amount is equivalent to about 10% of the waste sent to landfills in 2022. And this is data that is not captured when we look only at waste generation data as an indicator. The goal for this indicator is to see the amount of reuse and repair activity increase over time in the region. I want to emphasize that this indicator is a work in progress, and we hope to be able to put a finer point on the data as investment and reporting increases in this area. Next slide. I also want to share ways we are working to advance reuse in our own operations. This slide highlights one of our ongoing partnerships with local organizations to give materials collected through our household hazardous waste program another life. This is an area where we see greater opportunity to increase reuse within our own station operations. Next slide. The last measure I want to touch on is greenhouse gas consumption-based emissions. When we look at waste through a climate change and consumption lens, the majority of emissions, 99%, are generated when we make, consume, and use materials and products, that orange and green part of the life cycle. Managing products at the end of their useful lives accounts for a very small fraction of emissions. Measuring consumption emissions allows us to identify which types of products have the most opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and focus our actions effectively. You see up here a baseline measure that we established in 2015, and we will have updated data in 2024. We wanted to lift this up today as it will be a key indicator when we look towards waste prevention and advancing progress towards our climate goals. Next slide. As you know, our department conducted robust engagement over the last 8 months to help shape our proposed budget and fees and key investments in council's target areas that I want to walk through next. Next slide. Building from learnings of our budget last year and as a part of council's budget note, we have increased our engagements this year, including the Regional Waste Advisory, the Waste Fee Policy Task Force, budget roundtables with individual stakeholder groups, as well as increased touch points with council. And you can see one of the photos of the Waste Fee Policy Task Force here. This included more than 20 engagements across these groups to help inform the proposed budget that you see today. Based on the feedback from participants, I believe these engagements really strengthened relationships across these groups and improved our understanding of stakeholder priorities where we can make continued improvements on the engagement of our budget. Next slide. This slide captures what we heard across those budget roundtables and in the Regional Waste Advisory Committee. Key themes included investment in reuse, in particular exploring sustainable funding for reuse organizations. We also heard feedback on aligning our investments and partnerships with organizations that have both social and environmental goals, in addition to balancing costs with services. Participants also shared the importance of continued focus on budget transparency and increasing efforts in specific program areas, including collection events and investment in safety at public transfer stations. Next slide. Next, I want to highlight targeted investments in next year's budget in the areas of environment and economy. First, our investments into managing household hazardous waste. By state law, we are required to provide collection for these materials, and we do that through operation of the 2 permanent facilities that collected more than 4 million pounds of hazardous waste last year. We also have a strategic planning effort underway to consider how we can better expand access to these services for those communities both in equity zones and far away from those permanent facilities, and we'll be sharing the results of that effort with you this fall. The second area of investment is with local government partnerships. We provide direct funding, more than $4 million, to local governments through annual grants to support waste reduction. In addition, we also provide funding for local government positions to support implementation of the food scraps requirement. And as I shared previously, providing support through our new disaster debris reserve grant program that council approved in 2022. The third area of investment is in our waste prevention and education programs. These investments help us meet state waste reduction requirements and are really critical for building environmental literacy and community capacity. Most recently, Metro took on coordination of the Master Recycler program for the region in 2022, and during this calendar year, 2023, nearly 200 volunteers provided more than 6,000 hours of service across the region. The last area to highlight is community cleanup. These investments support not only our community stewardship crews that are out cleaning up dump garbage, but we will also be bringing on new partners inside Alliance and Rapid Response as a part of our workforce development and training program. We will continue to build out this program this year. We are also seeing continued success with our regional refresh program. We approved that making that program a long-term program with last year's budget. And this year we've awarded more than $300,000 of grants and sponsorships to support community-driven cleanup efforts, totaling 72 projects. Lastly, work is also underway to pilot expanded sharps collection in the region, and council will get updates on these key investments in the coming year. Next slide. In addition to these investments, we will also be working to expand on top priorities for waste reduction, and these include 3 key areas that you see up here. First, we'll be focusing on expanding opportunities and partnerships for reuse. This includes being responsive to stakeholder feedback and assessing an approach for sustainable funding for private and nonprofits to support reuse. We plan to bring forward a proposal for council consideration in this coming year. In addition, we will be assessing opportunities to support reuse in Metro-owned spaces, including opportunities to increase cleaning at our transfer stations and suggestions to look at Metro's vacant plaza space here at MRC. Second is continuing our work on food waste reduction. Food waste makes up one of the largest portions of our garbage, and in landfills, it serves as one of the single largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. Work will continue on the implementation of the food scraps requirement and pursuing investments to support local and diverse markets. We will also be convening a food waste reduction summit this summer to convene public, private, and nonprofit representatives to explore opportunities for partnerships to accelerate progress toward our goals. Lastly, priority policy projects, including the System Facilities Plan and implementation of the Recycling Modernization Act, will help shape our future investments to modernize the garbage and recycling system. Next slide. Lastly, I want to touch on our budget modifications that Patrick previewed. Next slide. For FY25, we have included 3 modifications. First is a position to provide needed capacity to address the audit recommendations. This position will specifically be dedicated to maintaining our standard operating procedures focused on safety. Second is a position for our traffic team at Metro South to reduce dependency on variable hour employees and address staffing gaps. And third is a partial FTE for our Recycling Information Center. This position was reduced during COVID, and adding this partial FTE will allow us to restore service levels. This concludes our presentation, and I will turn it back to President Peterson for questions.
Awesome, thank you. A lot to do. Much appreciated, and I think a lot of it reflects not only what you're hearing out in the community, but what the council has been working on. So thank you. I just want to thank you for that responsiveness. Council, any questions? Counselor, I'm sorry, your hand. There it is, Councilor Gonzalez and then Nolan.
Thanks, President Peterson. The first question that popped to my mind there's a lot of questions. The first one is on the reserves. I don't know why in my mind. What was our pre-pandemic reserve level before we needed to really deploy the rate stabilization? Does anyone remember?
It was
like
either Patrick or Sam. It was probably double what we had.
Yeah, it was a lot more, right?
We significantly depleted it when we did not raise fees during the pandemic, and so the focus now is restoring those reserves levels.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Councilor Gonzalez and Metro Councilors. further away. My name is Cinnamon Williams, Financial Planning Director, previous WPES Finance Manager in a long past life. When we went it, the last year of our highest was about 55, almost $56 million. We used over that period of time from basically 2020 to about 2022, about $18 million worth of fund balance reserves.
For rate stabilization, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great number, and I think one that we don't talk about enough from essentially a utility for garbage and recycling in the region, and how we use that tool. So my question, and thank you, Senator. My question follow up to that is then, was that reserve at the 50-55? Was that something that we strive to go back to? Was that it feels like a pretty high number, and if I remember from the presentation, we're currently in compliance for our kind of 45-day. So I kind of want to understand a little bit more about that, and it's very important to have healthy reserves. I acknowledge that, but I want to understand what you're thinking in terms of that, because it's always like safety for later or improvements in the now, and it's a tension always policy.
I really appreciate that question, and it's really relevant to the discussions that we're having today. And I think there's two parts to it. One is we meet the 45-day operating requirement. I know there is potentially a movement to move to a 60-day as a best practice. That sort of came up in the Waste Fee Policy Task Force, and my understanding that is something that is potentially being explored. Beyond that, for our department, the reserves matter as it comes to our capital improvement plan. We have, to my understanding, historically as a department, been a pay-as-you-go when it comes to capital because we've had really healthy reserves. So we're very much in a different state today when it comes to looking into the future for capital investments. So currently in our capital improvement plan, any new capital, if you wanted to, like, for example, the purchase of the redeployment building, we had to amend the budget in order to include that. So as we look to the system facilities plan, there will need to be decisions made around how we fund that in the future, whether it be a pay-as-you-go or whether we look at different financing mechanisms to fund larger investments in the system.
Okay. Is the nexus between high reserves correlate to just in general the different system facility scenarios that we've discussed, or kind of not really? Because I'm sure there are other tools we could deploy, but
well, I think about the comparison to other cities and counties when it comes to infrastructure plans. Most of those are funded through bonds. Revenue debt bonds is a mechanism that's available to our department. In some of our conversations with the Waste Fee Policy Task Force, some of the members were surprised that we were carrying no debt as a department, because in most instances you would need to have some high bond to be able to finance a significant level of infrastructure investments over time. We've been very fortunate that we haven't had to do that because we've had these plentiful reserves. But we're now at this kind of nexus of a really aging system that needs investment and decisions around how we want to finance those investments over time. So those are really key decision points that council will have to make around the system facilities plan. So we have a guide path for where we want to make those investments in the system, because we know that there are gaps, particularly when it comes to household hazardous waste on the west side.
Right, yeah. Thanks for the shout out. Appreciate that. My last question on this, and then I'll let others go since I see we have more hands up. But in 2019, because of the very healthy level of reserves, we had the ability to create the pilot program for I&I, Investment and Innovation. If my memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, it was funded out of reserves initially.
I think we were able to deploy a few million, which was I think great at that time to be able to do that. And as we envision the future of that, because I know we're in this kind of like potential pivot phase or planning that your department is doing. Are you thinking of kind of making that more of a program that is funded more through different sources, or is it still something that would be potentially coming out of reserves over time? Or and if you already addressed that in some document somewhere, I apologize for
No, I think that's a great question because it's something that we haven't touched on in a while. I believe it was in either fiscal year 22 or 23 that the INI program was moved over to the fee. So currently it's funded. It was in the reserves, and then we moved it over. Now it's a regional system fee funded program.
Okay.
So that's a great question.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, but it is a decision point around we're doing this assessment to decide how council wants to use.
And the RSF funded it at the same level as the original pilot, which is like $3 million a year.
It is at the last grant cycle was $2 million, not including the FTE associated with that program.
Okay, still a significant.
It's a significant amount of money.
Okay, I'll leave that there, and then I might come back with another one.
Now, Councilor Nolan, Lewis, and Rosendahl, and then
thanks, Madam President. Thanks for the presentation. One observation first: your key performance metric for reduce and recycling. I want to applaud that because I think it's important for us to look beyond the widgets we handle internally to how it affects the world outside of what we do. And that's a perfect example of focusing on that. Thank you for that. And then just a quick technical question. You talked about additional moving comms folks back, and I think you said 7 of the positions of the 9 or so, 7 were in that category. Can you tell me, are those folks part of our reuse, recycle education program, or what are their duties?
That's a great question. So just to share back, we had 7 positions that were previously a part of direct service providers to WPES, but were paid for by the cost allocation plan. Now those positions are being moved directly into our department and being funded by our department, which is why you see that shift. So that team provides services across our department, so anywhere from supporting our education and promotion of our waste prevention education programs to supporting communications for council around monthly updates to communications to our external stakeholders around budget engagement. So they also work on media in collaboration with media responses in collaboration with central communications. So they really hold a diverse portfolio of services. I don't know if Carrie, you want to add anything to that?
So then perhaps let me get at the question a different way.
Mm-hmm.
7 comms positions. Are there additional staff at WPES that do education programs?
Yes.
Separate from those?
Yes.
So we have 7 plus how many?
I would have to do a count. You heard from a number of them. Our waste prevention education programs include both our secondary education team, which is about 4 educators, and as well as our adult education and research and outreach that is done through our recycling information center. So it's John might have who oversees that program, a better head count, but we look at those very differently in terms of our educators that go out to schools and outreach versus communications that are done.
And does that number include also the positions that we co-fund with kind of counties and things like that, or is that just Metro fully funded?
That's Metro fully funded. So the grant investment that I showed you, that $4 million, that's direct funding that goes to grants that primarily is for positions within their organizations to fund waste reduction work.
President Peterson?
Yeah.
If I may, and we will go back and get these numbers for you, but I believe that when we're talking about comms, we're also talking about community engagement positions. And that is, while we label it comms, it is very different work. And I know that at times when I look at the number of people that we have in communications, it seems very big until I drill down and be like, actually, like a ton of these are community engagement and working on the ground with different communities. So
We'll make sure to make that differentiation in future presentations. So I think it really matters. But I don't know if you could comment now on how many of those folks are. We won't try to guess in public. We'll get you those.
Yeah,
Don't.
yeah. I'd rather guess with
Yeah.
information than guesses. Thank you for the
Appreciate the
effort.
question.
Just follow up.
All right, Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I want to first start by thanking one of those comms people for helping you find the most beautiful piece of art around food waste. Food waste is normally quite ugly, but the one in your slide was beautiful. It was staged, that's not real. So good work, because normally I think that would have upset our stomachs. So I appreciate the presentation today. The emphasis on what we can do in the near term on reuse feels really right and in alignment with what we've heard. And I think that the nonprofit and providers out there are doing really good work. They've engaged with us in good faith. I will be disappointed if this year we don't take some significant steps forward for stability, for coordination, and frankly for figuring out what piece Metro can carve off as our role in the ecosystem. I do have two questions that are really wonky. So the Metro Central POS, why is Metro Central getting a new POS and not Metro South with more customers?
It's both. If that was maybe a mistype on that slide, it is for both transfer stations.
Okay. Confirmed?
Confirmed. Yeah. Confirmed. It's a whole system upgrade.
Great. Okay. Thank you. That's really important. And then second, with the 0.4 FTE that's being used to decrease over-reliance on variable hour employees that maybe it seems like are coming out of the pandemic and misclassified as variable hour, is 0.4 really enough? This is something we actually struggle with agency-wide. You're one of two departments that I've heard flagged by workers for sometimes over-reliance on variable hour, that we could do a better job of career laddering. I would like us to make sure that we have the resource, and 0.4 doesn't feel enough.
And I really appreciate that question. That is a priority for our department as a whole, is reducing that dependency on variable hour employees. And that 0.4 will allow us to make an existing part-time position that was reduced whole. So we have a full 1 FTE, because currently we're backfilling that partial with variable hour because we made reductions during COVID. So it actually gets us to about making an FTE whole.
In one place.
In one place.
Do you think that's happening anywhere else?
We have no other partial FTEs that at this point that we need to make whole. I mean, this has been something that we've been really focused on. Actually, there might be one. I take that back. There is a 0.8 in our food waste reduction program that provides technical assistance.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam President. I have 3 questions, but I'll only ask 2 of them. I won't ask my dad a question. But the first question is, we're undergoing or doing some planning to undergo some changes potentially for the community investment, community enhancement process, and then also looking at a more regional distribution of reuse recycling. Is it correct to assume that if we maybe decided to, let's say, add a new recycling facility in Sherwood, for example, just as an example, that would come out of next year's budget, or would that, because there doesn't seem to be the money in the capital reserves to do anything with anything like new investment like that at this point in time. So, I mean, we have a bunch of different options. We could create new funding, or we could take it out of capital, or we could just postpone it for a year. So the question is what we're going to do with that in this, and then I'll go through this, and then I have one other more general question.
So I think the question is, if we were to build a new facility, would it also include community enhancement fees?
No. I mean, we can build a new facility. We could also we've also talked about reallocating community investment and community enhancement things, really changing the formula or changing the distribution of those. And so, where would we see those? We don't see those in the current budget, but would they be postponed until next year, or would we see them in some mid-course budget correction?
In the current budget. Right.
Councilor Rosenthal, I think the question you're asking is about what projects are included in the capital improvement plan.
Mhm.
And what we have in the capital improvement plan right now are only projects approved by council. So if council were to make decisions down the road related to the systems facilities plan or some other project to approve capital investments, we would need to amend the capital improvement plan, or depending on the timing, if it happened during next year's budget process, it would get added to the budget at that point.
If it was mid-season, we might do it mid-season. Otherwise, we might wait until next year. Okay.
Yes.
And then my other general question is, other than a public perception benefit, have we ever given thought about separating garbage and reuse into two separate divisions, reuse, recycling, and reduce, and then a garbage division? I mean, they're just from a perception standpoint that has some benefits, but have we ever thought about doing that in a functional sense?
Functionally, the department has multiple divisions. We have one that's focused on our planning and policy, really on policy and legislation and oversight of private facilities. And then our community services and education division is really focused on waste prevention, education, as well as making sure people know how to dispose of things safely. That's a lot as in our cleanup services and grants and partnerships. And then our fourth division is our garbage and recycling operations. So it is somewhat separated, but as a part of our waste prevention curriculum, there's always the inclusion of where, one, how to address consumption behavior, and two, proper disposal are two key components of that as well.
Great. Councilor Wong.
Yep. Thank you, Madam President. I just have one line of questioning. I saw in the slides there was a focus for the Red Patrol on equity focus areas. I think that's the right approach, but I'm wondering what is happening in the non-equity focus areas, and also kind of like what is the current response time. I think what I'm trying to get at is, is Red Patrol serving the whole region, and what is the actual need? Because I saw the number of tons from the EFAs, but that doesn't tell me how many tons we're not getting to, or is it a slower response time in other places? Yeah, just wondering what is the current state of our Red Patrol and community cleanups.
We do have the dashboard that provides information on all the different sites that are reported, and you can kind of track the response time to those sites, so it gives kind of that fuller picture that I think you're seeking beyond just looking at that metric on tons collected and percentage of equity where those exist in the equity zones. So I'm happy to provide some additional detail follow up on this, but we do track that based on sites reported and our ability to collect them across the region.
I guess big picture wise, is that program meeting the region's needs?
I think there is continued demand, and our crews are working really hard to be responsive. We've been able to maintain that 2-day response time across the region for reported sites, but I think it's difficult. It's a challenge to answer that question directly, because we are still continuing to see that demand increase. But when we look at the past numbers, I would say that they have been doing an exceptional job in getting out there and being responsive to areas that need to be cleaned up.
Great. Thank you. I'll hit the dashboard.
Just to that end, I'll just round this out. Great presentation. There's a lot of movement going on here and a lot of decisions we have yet to make. So very much looking forward to that. The one piece that caught my eye, and it's not for this conversation, it's for a budget conversation, but in the future, is we have a very small contract for investigations of dumping, illegal dumping. And I guess what I'd like to think about is we talk about the public good side of the equation.
not the transfer station side, but how we're providing that public good is the education on what's happening, why is illegal dumping happening, but more importantly, are there some innovative programs that we can create to incentivize people letting us know when they see illegal dumping, a hotline, something like that, that I understand it's hard to track down once it's dumped, unless there's an actual eyewitness, right, with a license plate and whatever. But just talking about what are innovative programs across the country that we could actually adopt and use, so that we could reduce the amount that's going on, because right now there's virtually no accountability built into the system because it's very hard.
Yeah, it does make it hard.
So I get that, but it's just a pin for future.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we can look into.
Okay. All right, seeing no other questions, thank you. Much appreciated. And council, I know a lot of us have a lot going on that we need to get to this afternoon. So if we could move through the Chief Operating Officer and Councilor Communications quickly, we might be able to all meet our next obligations. So go ahead.
I will.
Oh. It's just. Can we turn it off?
Thank you. Sorry. A lot of sensory inputs. I will provide an update to you by email.
Okay, thank you.
Just an update on community visions and parks. So happy to do that.
Thank you. Counselors, any communication? Not trying to shut it down, just trying to keep it quick. Nope.
Oh.
All right. Councilor Rosenthal.
I'll just make a brief presentation. I mentioned already the WEA session, which bears on our SHS and housing bond, but the Oregon Zoo Foundation had their meeting this morning, which I attended, and they're working very hard to generate funds. They have the zoo rendezvous coming up, I think on the 3rd of May. They've encouraged people to attend and to come. It's a fundraiser. That's one thing. And then one interesting thing, they're going to beef up their this summer. They're going to beef up their what they call animal representatives. I'm missing this. What? Animal ambassadors. And one of the important things, if people ever ask you about that, is that the animals all get choice. If they don't want to go out and be an ambassador, they don't have to do that. They're not forced. And so it's a very proactive kind of process. But they're going to make that a lot more of those this summer, and it's going to be something that people are going to enjoy at the zoo.
Great. Thank you. With that, we are adjourned, and our next council meeting is next Tuesday, April 16th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. Thank you so much.